sorry.
Good morning, and welcome to the McLean County Museum of History. It's so nice to see you all. This program is being live streamed. A special thank you to our live stream sponsors, WGLT, Bloomington-Normal's Public Media, part of the NPR network. Before we get started, my name is Susan Hartzold. I am curator of exhibits here at the museum, and on behalf of the museum, thank you for doing this program. We're really excited about this. The museum is a nonprofit organization founded in 1892 and accredited by the American Alliance of Museums since 1984. Less than 5% of museums in the United States are accredited, so we are very proud of that fact. After the program, I invite you all to explore our exhibits on the first floor. They are our core exhibits falling under the category of challenges, choices, and change, and include making a home, working for a living, and farming in the Great Corn Belt, as well as an exhibit about Abraham Lincoln in McLean County. There's also a gallery open on the third floor of the Merwin Gallery that showcases an additional 300 objects in our collection. Before I really get started, I want to say something about Dr. Toro-Morn, who in my opinion is a treasure, as her work in the university has spilled beyond the university into the community, and he's making an impact not only on her students, but on the work we do here at the museum. I was thrilled when WGLT included her in their survey of women making history in McLean County during Women's History Month this year. Illinois State University, through the work of Dr. Toro-Morn and her students, is an important partner with the museum's Latino History Project, which began nearly 25 years ago, and is dramatically helping to increase our resources. The project's purpose is to research and record the culture and experience of Latinos who have settled in McLean County, and to identify and collect artifacts associated with their culture and lives to be used for exhibitions, programs, and publications. These will all enable the museum to share with our community the rich stories and culture of the Latinos in our community. This partnership aligns with the museum's mission to preserve, educate, and collaborate in sharing the diverse stories of the people of McLean County. This is the second year that Dr. Toro-Morn's senior capstone class has participated in this project, and I'm so looking forward to today's presentations, as last year's were excellent. And now I will pass the program on to Dr. Toro-Morn.
Buenos días. Good morning. I am delighted to be here this morning, and I want to welcome you to the second Sembrando Raíces in the Heartland conference, the Oral Histories of Latino, Latine, Latinx in Central Illinois. I want to first thank the museum, extend my most heartfelt gratitude, first to the students that last year took on my invitation to be part of this experiment kind of thing. When you accepted my invitation to be part of this project, you accepted an invitation to really challenge the bounds of knowledge, right? The way knowledge is produced. You accepted an invitation to engage in a project that goes beyond what you have been trained to do. You were part of a project that is now leaving a legacy in the community, right? You have helped construct an account of Latinos living in Central Illinois through each one of your projects. And each one of your projects contributes to complicating the conversation of belonging. And in my view, you have learned the most important lesson that there is to be learned about knowledge, and there is knowledge for whom. Knowledge is created, is developed to build communities. And so I am very proud of the work that you have done, and I can't thank you enough and celebrate you and uplift you in terms of the work that you have done. I also want to thank the museum because you, in many ways, have also transformed the boundaries of knowledge. When communities and universities collaborate, we break the walls of knowledge, right? When communities and universities collaborate, we sort of develop a profound assessment or a profound what is the word that I'm looking for? Commitment to the fact that knowledge should not stay within the walls of the institution, within the walls of the university. Knowledge is really to help communities and to embolden communities. And I also want to thank my department, the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, for the freedom, and these days the word freedom carries an extra meaning, for the freedom to be able to do this, right? To be able to engage students in this amazing learning opportunity. I do want to say a few words about how we're going to proceed this morning, which is each one of the students, we have a panel of 7 presentations that will go, they will go one after each other because, you know, they're very dense and important presentations. And then at the end of all of the presentations, we will have an opportunity for Q&A. And then the second panel will come immediately about maybe about 5 or 10 minute break. Then we will have the second panel. And so without further ado, then I want to invite my colleague Frank Beck to the stage to welcome everyone on behalf of the Department of Sociology.
This is the good stuff. This is why we do what we do. And I know you're nervous. Yeah. But this is in part professional development. And so go with the flow, enjoy the roller coaster. All right. So sociology and anthropology, the sociology program values this kind of capstone experience for its students. We see it, I'm a sociologist, we see it as building upon the other required and even elective classes that students have enrolled in over time. And then Maura takes the extra step of having you do something that's of benefit to the community. And that's why, that's in part what you've done this semester and why you're doing this here today. So it's the culmination of your research methods class, your theory class, all of your electives classes, and you get to obtain an oral history from a community member, and then that's going to go in the archives. That's going to be a permanent record. So I offer congratulations to you, and as a faculty member, thank you to Maura for pulling this together for the second time around. And I know a few of you from classes that I've taught, and it's great to see you. And congratulations on, I think it's, graduation is May 10th, right? So best wishes to all of you. I now turn it over to you, and I don't know what to do with this. Okay, all right.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tamara Anderson, and my project today is the impact of immigration policy on community. So my project is inspired by Sujay Vega's Latino Heartland of Borders and Belonging in the Midwest, where Vega explores the effects of immigration politics on residents of Lafayette, Indiana. Vega's emphasis was on Latinos and their interpretations of the meaning of community and whether they could feel a sense of belonging in Lafayette amid heavy debates on immigration policy. Vega highlighted the importance of including non-Latinos and opposing opinions to her study as it would illustrate how the national rhetoric against immigration influenced the local opinions of who belonged into the community and what conditions allows one to become accepted into the community. At the start of my SOS 300 class, the McLean County Board had recently held a meeting voting on Representative Chuck Erickson's Immigration Services Resolution. The resolution proposed that, quote, McLean County will not accept or provide taxpayer-funded services to migrants sent to McLean County by any other state or municipality. I knew that I wanted to connect Vega's Latino Heartland of Borders and Belonging in the Midwest to Erickson's proposal that created divisive strains in the McLean County community similar to Lafayette. So this led me to my research question, which is how have supporters of anti-immigration policies constructed their own meaning of a sense of community? Who and under what conditions belong to that community? For my methodology, my data set was a McLean County Board meeting that I accessed from YouTube, and from there I learned that it was held on January 11th, 2024. There was public comment from all 20 McLean County Board members and 44 locals, from ISU students to residents. 7 county board members voted for Erickson's resolution and 13 voted against, and 4 out of 44 local speakers approved of Erickson's resolution. First, I watched a video to scope out the general consensus of any views, similarities, or differences between the speakers who expressed anti-immigrant sentiment. Secondly, I transcribed and coded the meeting to begin my first level of analysis, and that led me to creating a table of every participant in the meeting, including information that could be found on the McLean County Board website, as well as self-descriptions from locals. These are 2 examples of the table that I made of everyone involved in the meeting. On the left is the McLean County Board members. I included their political affiliations that I found on the McLean County Board website. And I also have anti or pro-immigrant listed as an indicator on if the views they expressed in the meeting qualify as anti or pro-immigrant. On the right, I did the same for locals, but as I said earlier, I included self-descriptions from their public comment as insights on their backgrounds. After coding my transcription, I found 4 themes among those who expressed anti-immigrant sentiment. For one, resource scarcity, where there is a belief that there is not enough resources in McLean County for residents to share with incoming immigrants. Second, legality. There, of course, was a lot of mentions on the need for immigrants or migrants to follow the U.S. legal system to be worthy of using their taxpayer services. Crime was commonly connected in the proposal and speakers with immigration and fear-mongering attempts, as well as the idea of fairness, a shared concept among anti-immigrant supporters. Those who expressed anti-immigrant sentiment in their public comment pushed this idea of fairness, often referencing that the government's focus should be on U.S. citizens who are in need instead of helping incoming immigrants for the sake of what is fair. Existing disparities in access to resources and opportunities can create this false sense of competition toward immigrants, reinforcing the idea pushed by anti-immigration policy that immigrants are to be viewed as outsiders or competitors than fellow community members. The similarities between this excerpt from Erickson's proposal on the left and the speaker at the meeting, Kim Miller, points out how immigration policy can completely disseminate and construct criteria of who can become members of a community, like with explanations like these to back it up. In both of these quotes, there's the use of drug cartels, crime, and victimization of women and children. These two reinforce a shared narrative and are echo chambers of each other. So who can be accepted into the community? The language in the Immigration Services Resolution and the 5 speakers both put an emphasis on legality. The only indication of acceptance of immigrants in the proposal were the ones who were seeking legal entry into the United States. Citizen constituents that were deserving of, quote, limited taxpayer resources were referenced as lawful in the resolution, and in public comment, the immigrants were perceived as community members were those that had went through the naturalization process. Anti-immigration policies like Chuck Erickson's Immigration Services Resolution heavily influence how anti-immigration supporters construct their own meanings of community. This can be seen through wanting to maintain identity, whether it's national identity or in this case, wanting to keep their idea of McLean County they have grown accustomed to. This influence can also be seen through the conscious and unconscious criteria of acceptable community members that these supporters share and is rampant in the language seen in immigration policy used to justify anti-immigrant sentiment. And this collaborates with their perception of what community should be and look like. Secondly, language analysis of words like community can gain an understanding of nuanced topics like immigration, patterns that reveal existing disparities within a society, and differences and influences on public opinion. Lastly, I learned the importance of including opposing views in research on complex topics like immigration. I think especially as a sociology major, including views, whether you believe them or not, allows the researcher to shed light on how complex the topic is at hand. One thing I've learned is that everything cannot be viewed on a surface level. It allows a more nuanced understanding of socioeconomic factors that are driving this division and the perception of what community truly means and the understanding of the power and policy. How it can truly change belief systems, the language we use, and more importantly, how we interact with each other. To conclude, I will close my project with Sujay Vega quote that encapsulates the importance of community and establishing a sense of belonging, especially to immigrants. Quote, for immigrants and especially undocumented immigrants, belonging to community matter deeply. The collective we and the politics of belonging, determining who belong to local and national ideas of an us, have material consequences for those within and outside the community. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christion Lloyd. My project today is called The Voices of New McLean, Advocating for Immigration and Rights and Compassion. To start off, I would say thank you for coming and thank you for giving this opportunity to give us the opportunity to show what we learned in class and also to show what we did research on as well. For my introduction, I'm starting off with saying the Latino community in McLean County, Illinois is the center of the national debate on immigration laws and rights for unauthorized immigrants. As proposed, the county resolution aims to restrict support in unauthorized immigrants, sparking heated debate and revealing deep division in the community. Supporters of the resolution argues that defending the rule of law, protecting limited resources, and maintaining the effectiveness of immigration laws. Opponents criticize the resolutions a discriminatory, violating civil rights, and perpetuating harmful stereotypes against the Latino community. The debate has gained national attention, showing the complex relationship between local government and lived experience of the Latino population. My sociological analysis will show the perspective on the issues using rhetoric analysis, archival research, and quantitative data analysis. The research aims to examine the potential impact of the resolution on vulnerable populations, economic growth, and community cohesiveness. Ultimately, I wanted to find out the issues facing the Latino population in McLean County and inform policy decisions rooted in ethical principles and democratic values. These are some of the books that I thought that related very much to the experience that was happening in McLean County. To start off with Suje Vega, Professora, she definitely pushed this book, and I believe it really connected about its inclusiveness and bringing the Latino community together in McLean County. To start off, it explores the daily life of the Latinos and the non-Latinos in a small Indiana town amidst national immigration debates, showing how national debates divides neighbors and impacts community dynamics. They show the strategies used by the residents to combat the hate fueled by the political rhetoric, showing how the community members is determined and redefined by the advocating of inclusion. Consider a racial dynamics at play as immigrants assert themselves to belong. Explore how Spanish-speaking residents navigate community belonging without sacrificing their differences, showing how Latino Hoosiers assert their rights and redefine belonging within their homes, place of worship, and a public eye. This is to advocate the town to embrace the complexity and the diversity, working towards inclusivity, and going towards Dividing Lines by Daniel J. Titchener. It explores the importance of immigration in American history, offers the comprehensive study of political and policies surrounding immigration from founding eras to contemporary times, analyzes the immigration policy and the evolution, traces the evolution of immigration policies from founders' efforts and shapes of the American identity to the modern day struggles and over the third world immigration, non-citizen rights, and illegal immigration as well. Describes lively political battles between immigration defenders and skeptics throughout history, examines transformative policies, regimes built through the political battles, explores in 19th century politics, Chinese exclusions, racist quotas of the 1920s, post-World War II immigrations, and the surge of restrictionist favors of the 1990s. And then going into Inventing America, the First Immigration Crisis by Luke Ritter, it focuses on the antebellum West, examining the America's first nativist movement and responds to the rapid immigration between 1840 and the 1860s, showing the rise of National American Party, investigating why Westerns joined the National American Party and why anti-immigrant riots erupted the Western cities like Chicago, Cincinnati, Louisville, and St. Louis. Explores how the nativism shapes the political relationship between church states, renewing American commitment to church-state separation, argues that nativism forced Americans to adopt more inclusive definitions of religious freedom despite tension of the Catholics and the immigrants, offers a valuable insight in American history of nativism and the U.S. politics and the relevance of present-day concerns about immigration, including the role in anti-Islamic appeals in recent elections. Speaking more about how I found or how I got my data, the research method, it was mostly a mixed method. So I was able to use transcription analysis, archival research, and rhetoric analysis. To talk on the rhetoric analysis, I examined the language, the themes, persuasive strategies, and the rhetoric devices used by the pro-immigration advocates. Identify the emotional appeals, authority appeals, the vivid imagery. And then the archival standpoint, I explored the history documents, reports related to immigration policies and community dynamics in McLean County. I studied the video and transcribed of the county board meeting, and I analyzed the vocal contributions of the pro-immigration speakers. I identified trends, moral foundations, and individual narratives influencing the immigration debate. In the qualitative research, we did everything in a qualitative research standpoint. I relied on available data source such as public records and meeting transcripts, showing the needs for concrete data and rejects the substance of the anti-immigration resolution, shaping the direction of the analysis and emphasizing the major ideas surrounding immigration in McLean County. My overall goal of this project was to provide insight into various viewpoints and the voices promoting immigrants' rights and inclusion in the heated debate. Integrated ideas from the transcription analysis, the archival research, and the rhetoric analysis to shed light on the pro-immigration campaigning for McLean County. This is speaking on the people that were looking at the family standpoint in McLean County and why it's important to keep immigrant families together in McLean. One of the speakers, Jill Blair, expressed her gratitude to the past American generosity and urges the board to consider the compassionate spirit of the ancestors in rejecting the resolution. Marian Diaz, she was also an immigrating from Mexico, telling her real personal story about how she navigated her family from Mexico to McLean County and coming for the reasons of having a better life for her kids and having a better life overall. And it's really not fair for her to really not leaving a community for the better, but then your new community really doesn't want to welcome you here. And that's really not fair for her, and especially for her children. It advocates that immigrant children's rights are essential to service like healthcare and education. Will Helbert attends the meeting with her great-granddaughter advocating against the resolution, emphasizing the community and commitment to unity and compassion. She stood out to me the most because she was really the only black speaker, but also the only black woman speaker as well too, bringing her child. And she was just showing her children that it is important to really speak up for what you believe in, and it's really important to really involve the kids and also to have that conversation with the kids early on. From the rules of law standpoint, to give you guys a few ideas, Deanna Howman, representing the League of Women Voters of McLean County, citing that the organization supports for fair treatment under the law and urging resolutions and address basic needs of uphold human rights. Charlotte Alvarez condemns the resolution as inhumane and detrimental to the county's tax bases and public safety, advocating that welcoming and inclusive policies. Julie Lynn highlights the potential denial and basic services to migrants and questioning its premises, emphasizing the importance of welcoming newcomers and upholding human rights. Speaking from the God's eye view, well, from a religious background, because there was a lot of religious leaders that came to the meeting as well. Molly Ward, one of the faith leaders, came in. She was drawing attention to the Gospels and Matthews, urging that board members should have a moral obligation on voting against the resolution. And also Reverend Brian Hastings, acknowledging the complexity of immigration issues, but advocates the compassionate and just solutions-based shared values and inherent dignity in every individual. This is a reaction from the board members' viewpoint, and Jack Abram, a U.S. Army veteran, shares a story about the immigrant soldiers' dedication, condemning the resolutions as a betrayal of the immigrant sacrifices and the messages of hatred of the community. And Beverly Bell, also a black community leader and a board member, was drawing a parallels of history and justice, expressing the alignment of Martin Luther King Jr. and the principles of opposing a resolution. In conclusion, it was a decisive 13 to 7 vote in favor of rejecting the resolution. It shows the power of collective action and the significance of unity in advocating for inclusive immigration measures. Their outcome highlights the responsibility of leaders to represent and prioritize the interests of a diverse community, recognizing the contributions and the rights of the immigrants within our society. By embracing the principles of strength in numbers, we affirm our commitment to fostering a more compassionate and equitable approach to immigration, reflecting the values of solidarity, empathy, and leadership in the shaping of a brighter future for all. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marisa Bresnahan. This is my presentation titled Immigration as a Puzzle, an Oral History with Charlotte Oliver's The Immigration Project. These are the three focuses of my paper. The first one being, what is the importance of working in the human rights and international law field? The second one being what role the McLean County had in immigration and the connections of McLean County and immigration. And the third one being what is the impact what kind of impact does today's false assumptions regarding immigration have on the legal side? My informant is Charlotte Alvarez. She is an immigration attorney and executive director of the Immigration Project. She also does work with DACA as well. My methods, I had gone through a list of potential informants. I went through each one and their expertise and the fields that they are in. I picked Charlotte due to the field that she works in, as it is related to the central focus of my paper. The years of experience working in immigration-focused areas was very important to me, as she has worked in those areas even since college. We had communicated through email. I had described in extended form of what it would entail for her participation in my paper. She graciously agreed, and we did conduct an interview. I had chosen an oral history because in the field of sociology and in qualitative research, oral histories are extremely important and crucial. They go into great detail. It can provide as a central focus of a storytelling structured history of one's life, as Charlotte had described to me her work in immigration. These are just 3 quotes that I wanted to highlight in this presentation. The first one being Charlotte describing some of her DACA-related work. DACA, if you do not know, is defined as deferred action for childhood arrivals. As it does not provide permanent protection, it does provide temporary protection for immigrants, and it has helped immigrants for years. In this quote, she describes her work, a little bit of her work in DACA, and she describes an upcoming workshop in which she will help immigrants renew their DACA. She described it as being a challenging field, but exciting at the same time. What is very important to me in this quote is that the law always changes. It always has some type of change that happens, and how quickly it can happen, and how it can also affect Charlotte's work in the lives of immigrants as well. The second quote also comes from Charlotte. It is a conclusion that she had come to on the other side of her immigration work. In our about 40-minute interview, she describes a couple of firsthand stories from clients that she has worked with, highlighting that the immigration system does need some reconstruction, it does need some improvement, and it fails to understand the realities of the immigrants' lives that it's affecting. And not only does it affect their lives, it also affects her work as well with them. She had described in the stories that she includes in our interview that she had to bring some heartbreaking news to some immigrants and how she could no longer proceed with working with them due to certain laws changing. And the third one is I chosen from our book, Latino Heartland, Sui Vega, which has been previously referenced in the past two presentations. It has been a large central focus of my capstone course. It highlights firsthand immigrant oral histories. If you have not read it, I do recommend. In this quote, it is describing a firsthand experience with the existing barriers in the system. And I think it's very important that we bring up these certain conversations and bring up the barriers that do exist for immigrants. In conclusion, after my interview with Charlotte, it was very enlightening, it was very inspiring. Immigration as a whole has a lot of different moving parts in it, and it does bring up very important and crucial conversations that we need to have more of. And immigration law is just being one piece of that entire picture and can also be described as a puzzle piece. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Megan Lowe. My presentation is titled Alienating Political Language Turned Catalyst for Social Movement, a conversation with an activist in Central Illinois. So just a little bit about me. I am a senior at ISU. I'm studying sociology and political science. And I came to this class with personal interests in criminal justice and legal reform and social justice. I really want to work as a wrongful convictions attorney on behalf of people who have been not done right by our country, whether that be in the legal system or other avenues. And so I was excited to see how I could take Profe's project in class and combine that with what I'm passionate about and interested in. And so I was really excited to discover this opportunity. So I want to kind of trace the story of my paper through my presentation and bring you through the process and illuminate some of my findings towards the end. So as I discussed, I was excited to see Dr. Toro-Morn's class offered as an option to fulfill our graduation requirement for a capstone course. She had this existing project that you're all part of now to collect oral histories from Latinos in Central Illinois and working with the McLean County Museum of History to deposit those so that they could be gathered and secured for anyone who wants to read them in the future and to document an important part of our community's story. So we read some of the oral histories that were collected by Profe's class last year, and I read one with Mr. Sonny Garcia, who's here with us today, that was talking about his story with the immigrants' rights movement in 2006. And I, through talking with Profe, decided I wanted to continue telling his story and continue documenting his experiences for the collection. So my research questions, these are what I started with. They did kind of evolve as I went through, but essentially I wanted to understand how language shapes belonging. Specifically, I wanted to focus on political rhetoric. So my first kind of sub-question, how did the divisive political rhetoric during the anti-immigrants' rights movement of 2006 to 2008 affect a Latino community activist in Central Illinois? And I wanted to compare that to how did this divisive rhetoric compare to that of Donald Trump during his presidency. And one thing I wished I had changed is I used the word presidency during all of my proceedings for the project, but I also did include anecdotes and research from his campaign, so prior to his presidency as well. My informant is Mr. Sonny Garcia, as I mentioned. He is a community organizer in Bloomington-Normal, and he's mobilized huge amounts of people to march in downtown Bloomington in a demonstration against a bill harmful to immigrant rights in 2006, which, like I alluded to before, was the oral history collected last year that I read. So that was kind of my introduction to Sonny as an informant. And Sonny also describes himself as an artist, a writer, a musician, a photographer, and also including his community organizing as part of his art. A little bit of historical background. These are on two sides, the two eras that I wanted to focus on. 2006 to 2008, the biggest issue is the Sensenbrenner Bill, which was officially called the Border Anti-Terrorism and Illegal Immigration Control Act. It was essentially designating unauthorized immigration as a felony as opposed to a civil offense, which effectively eliminated the possibility of citizenship for any current undocumented immigrants in the United States. In addition, the bill would have erected a fence at the US-Mexico border. It would have banned sanctuary cities or states, and it would have raised the penalty for employers that hired undocumented workers. And then 2016 to 2020, obviously a lot more recent, and I would argue pervasive, but we'll still touch on it formally anyway. That was the official era of Donald Trump. I focused, like I mentioned, on his presidential campaign and presidency. And essentially, to summarize those years, we heard from him horrifically racist language. He described Latinos as rapists, job stealers, criminals, people who take advantage of the system in all kinds of ways. He described countries, including El Salvador, with language that I can't even say in this presentation. And he leveraged votes through hate and fear. So similar sentiments in both eras, but obviously nuanced differences as well. My research, my methods, similar to everyone else, I conducted an oral history. I interviewed Mr. Garcia for about 40 minutes and carefully transcribed his interview and then identified themes from our conversation. I wanted to really make sure I was actively listening and letting Sonny tell me his story and documenting it as true to what he said as I possibly could. I also wanted to make sure we were having genuine conversation, so I was knowing my questionnaire and the questions that I had prepared, but also letting the natural flow of our conversation guide the topics we discussed. And overall, I just wanted to paint a true picture of Sonny's perceptions and experiences as a Latino in Central Illinois. So I decided to separate my findings into similarities and differences. Similarities in both eras, there were similar responses to the political language. People were mad and angry, which was an extension of the racism regularly experienced in Bloomington-Normal, as Sonny described. People were scared, understandably, the Sensenbrenner bill, and accompanying racist language from politicians and the president have the power to affect bills, and those all have very real implications, including deportation or increased hate. But then people were also invigorated in both eras. It increased mobilization. So Sonny described issue-based organizing versus electoral-based organizing, and those were some differences that came from this similarity of increased mobilization. So I'll talk about that when we get to the differences. And then I also included that there were varying degrees of these responses. So even though the responses were similar in both eras, things felt more severe, as Sunny described, during the era of Donald Trump. Sunny, in 2006, described feeling angry. He says 2006 was the beginning of ramping up the hate speech toward communities of color. And then he also said later, the lasting impression right after was hope. Really, the community had a lot of hope because we stopped the bill, we stopped the legislation. Oops. Okay. In terms of differences, this heralds back to the title of my presentation. Both eras had alienating political language used as a catalyst for social movement, but the difference was in the mobilization. In 2006, it was issue-based, and Sunny led the march in downtown Bloomington for immigrants' rights. And then in 2016, it was electoral-based organizing, and before 2016 during the campaigning as well, obviously. So in 2016, 2020, there was a greater sense of urgency. Racism was being outwardly ramped up in politics and in the community, and so that led to the switch to electoral-based politics. It's important to know that if Donald Trump were to be elected, and this points to fighting against a candidate, there would be catastrophic consequences for the Latino community. It would be more acceptable to hate following the leadership of the president. And obviously there would be increased anti-immigrant rhetoric, support for bills, Supreme Court nominations, the list goes on. And so this also, in terms of electoral-based mobilization, led to fighting for a candidate, which was Bernie Sanders. There was a promising future for Latinos in the community if Bernie Sanders were to be elected. Sunny notes that he was an independent, not beholden to big money from corporate America. He championed workers' rights. He advocated Medicare for all. He came from an activist background. And Sunny did note that Bernie Sanders was not initially vocal about Black Lives Matter, for example, and was not too keen on identity politics. But he was successfully pressured by his supporters, the movement, including Sunny and his fellow activists in Central Illinois, to embrace Black Lives Matter and identity politics. Sunny said, I know how bigots think and what they say. I've studied and read about it for years. They're following the same playbook, but at the same time, I knew that I was ready to fight. I knew that I was ready to do everything I could do to make sure he wasn't successful or was at least very, very uncomfortable by the activists and organizers around the country. He's speaking about Donald Trump there. I'm wrapping up, I promise. Our conclusions, Sunny's biggest takeaway from our interview was hope. He emphasized the hope for the future above everything else. This research hopefully will be validating to others in the community who may be feeling similarly about these issues in Central Illinois. Additionally, this research does confirm the literature. I didn't touch on that because I wanted to tell more of Sunny's story, but that will serve to embolden the movement and add academic validation, which is really important for further scholarly work, highlighting the importance of these efforts. And then Sunny concluded with ongoing work to be done. These racist political sentiments are not going away, and he emphasized that people should continue to be coming together to take care of themselves and protect each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Taniyah Tunstill, and for my senior capstone project, I chose to examine the role that cultural traditions play in after migrating to a new place, and how do they build a sense of belonging. And all of these pictures were given to me by my informant, Miriam, so thank you. In order to address my research questions, I have chosen to do a qualitative study with an informant who has migrated to McLean County from Mexico.
Through their life experiences, I'm able to build and find common themes within topics of belonging, immigration, and cultural traditions. I developed a questionnaire and I conducted the interview with Miriam on April 5th around 1 o'clock. Miriam has a lot of involvement with the museum in regards to the Day of the Dead, and so my project is to focus on the importance of cultural traditions while migrating to new places and finding your community. So Dia de los Muertos, also known as the Day of the Dead, is a holiday that started thousands of years ago in Mesoamerica in ancient times. This holiday is heavily celebrated by people with Latino descent. On November 1st, people remember their loved ones with traditions such as catching and preparing food, decorating their homes with marigolds, creating ofrendas or offerings in English. Some people cry on this day, some dance, and some rejoice, but it all depends on the person you're choosing to remember and how it makes you feel. All is welcome, as grieving is a process. And to further understand what Dia de los Muertos means, my informant suggested for people to watch the movie Coco. So here's a couple symbols that really encapsulate what the Day of the Dead means. So the marigolds on the right represent grief and death, and they also represent the Day of the Dead as a whole. The skulls were decorated on this holiday to symbolize the loved one you have lost and to honor their life. Mariposas, which translates to monarch butterfly, has a strong, beautiful meaning. The legend is, if you are touched by one during the Day of the Dead, this is your loved one contacting you or visiting you. Ofrendas, or offerings in English, are vital to honoring the lives during the Day of the Dead. The ofrenda represents 4 natural elements: air, wind, fire, and earth. You need candles, a lighter, water, flowers, a photograph or clothing item of a loved one, salt, paper, and a food item. I could be missing 1 or 2 things, but I did the best that I could. Here is an ofrenda from 2021 that Miriam had built, and it was actually in the museum, and I wish I was able to see it in person. But all of these pictures are from Miriam. She does everything herself. She also told me that when she goes over budget for projects, that she comes out of her own pocket to make sure that the vision is encapsulated. And so it's really beautiful to know that somebody is so passionate that they're willing to do whatever to complete the project. Miriam is very involved in the community, and I just want to start at the museum. Miriam had met workers at the museum who asked her to become involved at the History of Museum of McLean County, and here is where she began building community and building handmade presentations of various pieces celebrating the Day of the Dead and showing Mexican culture. This resulted in my informant gaining relationships in the community where they had the opportunity to bond over cultural traditions. And here's more pictures. Okay. Sorry. These are like my favorite pictures that she sent. So there were Barbie Dia de los Muertos, and she bought every single one of them so that they could be on display for people to see. And I just think it's so beautiful just knowing how much detail and effort went into the displays. Miriam is also involved at Rivian. Miriam stated that her husband is a contractor, so when he receives a job opportunity, they choose to relocate. They have lived in over 4 cities, and Miriam stated that this move to McLean County is more stable. Her husband works at Rivian as a contractor, and there she too gained community with the wives and girlfriends who have also had to relocate due to their partner's occupation. The community started very small, and Miriam was proud to tell me that there are nearly 300 members of these women who share the same feelings of alienation, loneliness, and a lack of sense of belonging after having to relocate to a place with no familiarity. So after analyzing the interview with Miriam, I found that factors such as community and cultural practices play a vital role in a person gaining a sense of belonging upon migration. Keeping traditions alive, such as the Day of the Dead, even in the United States, helps individuals feel closer to their culture, because when you move to the U.S., people often find themselves omitting pieces of themselves to better fit in this new environment and to be deemed more socially acceptable. Miriam is the perfect example of what it means to be a part of a community. She puts so much time and effort into her craft, with everything being made by hand, as well as her family helping as well. The projects Miriam takes on are truly a labor of love and reflects how important traditions are. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Jenny Lee, and my project is based on navigating a sense of community and belonging in a new place such as ISU. I chose this topic because I'm a first-generation student, and I came from a background where I had to figure everything out for myself. I had to figure out the college application process myself and figure out my transition on my own. This was a very difficult task for me because I had seen so many of my friends be supported by their families and being told the steps they had to take to get to college. And it really made me feel like I was at a disadvantage compared to others. This topic is important because Illinois State University is a big part of McLean County, and many students come from out of town or state to go to school here. They become residents of this town, and a lot of the times they find jobs and homes here in the meantime, and sometimes they even move here after college. I specifically chose mixed Latino women for this project because I believe their stories and experiences deserve to be shared and heard. I also believe that it is important to explore the topic of students with dual races because they have a unique background. They face different barriers than someone who identifies with one race, and it is important to be able to understand their experiences. I focused my project on these 2 questions. How do Latina students construct a community and sense of belonging at Illinois State University? And how do Latina students with dual races construct their sense of identity at Illinois State University? So for my method section, to conduct my research, I used a qualitative method of conducting in-person interviews. I interviewed 2 Latina students from Illinois State University. Both students identified as having dual races were interviewed. The first informant is Alexandria Onez. She's currently a sophomore studying elementary education at Illinois State University. She's 20 years old and identifies as Mexican and white. The interview with Alexandria lasted about 55 minutes. The second informant is Anna Vondrak. She currently is a senior studying marketing at Illinois State University. She is 22 years old and identifies as also Mexican and white. The interview with Anna lasted about 30 minutes. The questions were broken down into 7 different themes, such as high school experiences, transition to college, sense of community, ISU, extracurriculars, experiences with having dual races, support and resources, college career, and demographic questions. These questions were ordered in a way to be able to hear the story of these informants through their end of high school into coming to Illinois State University. I believe that learning a little bit about their lives before college was important because in high school experiences may have an impact on what they choose to do in college. Being able to talk about their transition to college taught me a lot for my research project because although the informants came from similar cultural backgrounds, they had, I would say, completely different experiences due to their home life and where they were from. I've included a chart with their descriptions, and when it came to and we knew our options going into the applications. Anna shared that her school did a very good job at portraying the college decision-making process in a positive way. While for Alexandria, she shared that her community and school made the, quote, the college decision-making process was a very hot topic in my community. It was that everyone was super competitive on who got into what school and who applied where. We were also able to dive into the topic of their sense of support and resources they had through getting to college and in college. Anna and Alexandria differ when it came to their parents' experiences with being able to help them throughout the process. Anna shared that her dad and siblings had gone through the process and she was able to gain their support and advice through this. When it came to Alexandria, she stated neither of her parents went to college, so that was something that she had to kind of do on her own and figure out for herself. And she also said, quote, that was a frustrating experience for me because I didn't have all the answers, so everything was kind of up in the air. Their parents' experiences through the process did make a big impact on both of them. Anna was able to be guided through this process because her dad and siblings have gone to college, whereas Alexandria had to navigate this whole process on her own. We were also able to talk about their experiences in college with their dual races. Anna felt growing up and now that she's equally connected to both sides of her cultures, while Alexandria identified that she felt a lot closer to her Mexican culture. Alexandria also shared that her family had wanted her to join a community that could help guide her and embrace her cultural identity. Lastly, when it came to talking about their sense of community and belonging at Illinois State University, they shared that they both went the route of joining a sorority. They were able to find connections and relationships through the process and identified that this has made a big impact on their sense of community and belonging. When it came to being a student at Illinois State University, I was able to ask them their definition of community, and Alexandria's response was, my definition of community is all kinds of people from different backgrounds coming together in one area and just kind of sharing the space with each other. An honest response was, I would say community is like-minded people who want to support the same ideas. We were able to touch on each of their sense of support when it came to ISU advisors, and Alexandria and Anna's responses were very similar. Alexandria shared that she felt she still has to continue to figure out stuff on her own and does not have as much support from her advisors, and Anna shared that she had heard that many people's advisors had messed up their schedules, so she has chosen to do everything on her own as well. They both identified that they were able to find their sense of belonging and community through meeting friends and being able to connect with other students on campus. Lastly, I was able to learn that both women felt their social needs were met when it came to making friends, were satisfied more so than when it came to cultural needs. In conclusion, through working on this project and being able to connect and talk to these Latina women, I was able to learn how big of an impact someone's race, background, and story can make on someone's future and life at college. It is important to tell and learn stories about minority students because a lot of the times, the struggle and barriers are overlooked, and they deserve at Illinois State University, and hope that in the future, programs and support systems will be made for the future and students wanting to attend college. Before I end, I want to say that not every Latina student is the same, and everyone has a different background and story, and every individual should be able to tell their own story in their own ways. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christopher Cajka, and the title of my presentation is Labels and Landscapes, Ethnic Labels and Identity Formation in the Midwest. This research project explores the interplay between ethnic labels like Chicano and identity formation, focusing on their significance in the Midwest. Ethnic labels such as Chicano are powerful indicators that not only define cultural heritage, but also have a significant impact on the formation of both individual and group identities in communities like Bloomington. I decided to do this topic because I never really knew much about the term Chicano, and my knowledge of other ethnic terms is not the best, so I thought that it would be informative and give me a new perspective. I broke, my central research question is how do cultural labels like Chicano form identity? And I broke this down into 3 separate questions, which are, what is the impact of education and representation on identity formation? To what extent does family heritage influence the labeling and identity of the word Chicano? And how do individuals navigate and establish a sense of belonging within their physical surroundings, particularly in contexts where cultural, social, or economic disparities exist? To answer my research questions, I first must know the history of the Chicano label. The roots of this term trace back to the early 20th century when Mexican immigrants used it to refer to Mexican Americans that had a low socioeconomic status. The meaning of the term changed once it became popular in the late 1960s, and it turned into a sense of ethnic militancy and self-movement in the late 1960s, in which leaders of the movement tried to increase pride of the culture's heritage, provide support for farm workers, political activism, opposition to discrimination, and demands for economic and educational equality. For Mexican Americans, this movement provided a necessary sense of group solidarity and cultural pride. During this time, Chicano art, literature, and music became powerful ways of forming identity, since many artists and musicians embraced this label as a means of expressing themselves. This term is still used by Mexican Americans today, but it is important to note that the term is not universal, and some prefer other terms like Mexican American, Latino, and Latinx. My research questions were answered through a video panel titled The Politics of Labels, Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, and What Else? This panel took place on September 12, 2023 at the McLean County Museum of History. I was able to watch this video on YouTube, transcribe it, and then analyze what the panelists said about labeling. The panel was a conversation about what identity labels mean for them and how they engage with them, and it was very informative oral history to use for my research project. Although it was a panel consisting of 5 people, I only used 3 in my research. Here are some short biographies about the panelists who had moving quotes which were used in my research. Sonny Garcia is a retired civil servant who has worked at Illinois State for 30 years, and he has done a lot for the Latino community here in Bloomington. He is an activist. He fights for the rights of the underrepresented. Michaela Harris works at the McLean County Museum of History. She has lived here her whole life, and she is a 3rd-generation Latina. Mario Jasso is a junior Illinois State University student, and he has also lived here his whole life. After analyzing the panel, I found 3 themes that helped answer my research questions. The first one was the meaningful impact of education and representation. Sonny Garcia talked about how when he was growing up, he was the only brown kid in school, and how he was called racial terms by people in his life who were supposed to be mentors, teachers, and people that were there supposed to take care of him. He also said that when he would go to his friend's house, their parents would say racially insensitive jokes. This created abandonment issues and self-hatred within him. Despite these obstacles, Sonny got his education and then graduated from ISU, and I feel that his social activist work is a result of the hardships he faced as a child. The second theme I found was about the connection to family heritage and how that has an influence on the Chicano label. In the panel, Sonny was asked about what it means to be Chicano, and he had a pretty straightforward answer. He said that his mother had a Chicano power tattoo, and he would also get the same one. Sonny was raised by a single mother, so he really admired her work ethic. He talked about how she has established pride in who he was as a Latino in this community. This shows a connection between family heritage and the meaning of the label Chicano, because tattoos are a meaningful way of expressing identity And I feel that since Sonny has the same Chicano tattoo as his mother, the meaning of the word is more meaningful and emotional. The last theme that I established in this analysis was how the environment has an effect on belonging and the inclusion of the Chicano label. Michaela Harris said that, "I think terms like Chicana and Chicano is very much rooted in the political movement and the activism taking place. So time and space can't be separated from these labels, and I think they are ever evolving." This was brought to light in one of Mario Jasso's responses, where he said that he had always seen that he was Mexican and he did not know the terms until he started a class that introduced him to Latino studies. Now he says he knows the concepts like Chicano and he's happy he's able to connect to them better. Since there is so much activism going on in our world right now to fight social injustice, many more people are identifying themselves as Chicano. Between analyzing these stories and exploring the historical facts on the term Chicano, it has become evident that these types of labels serve as powerful tools in shaping individual identities. These labels not only reflect cultural heritage and belonging, but they also empower individuals to redefine their identities within the cultural landscape they live in. Embracing and integrating labels like Chicano makes it so people like myself can have a more inclusive understanding.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Taylor Canuck. I was the graduate teaching assistant for Profay's SOS 300 capstone course this semester. I am very grateful to have worked with every single one of you young, brilliant students. Not that much younger than me, though, right? Right. So before we get into the Q&A, I do just want to give another big round of applause to every single person on the first panel. You guys all did wonderful. Awesome. So going into the Q&A, I do have one brief question if maybe a few of you would like to answer. What lasting impact do you see or do you hope to see come out of your guys' projects? You can use those two, or if you would like one of these microphones, you can answer, maybe two or three of you. Yeah, what lasting impact do you see or do you hope to see come out of your projects?
I think, sorry, hello?
Are they on? Here, let's pass this out.
Yeah. What I want to come from our research and our efforts is more diversity, more representation in spaces that we felt we weren't worthy enough to be in. I feel like we're opening a door to have that conversation, and that's where real change can begin.
I hope to see through my project that throughout my project, both students said that they felt socially satisfied with going to ISU, but I hope that in the future there's more programs implemented to help support these Latina students at Illinois State University. There should be more clubs and programs to better represent them at the school.
From my project, I hope that more conversations are brought up and are continued to be discussed through immigration in the same way that false assumptions can tend to bleed into the laws that are made and the policies that are made. I think, and I hope that positive conversations can also do the same.
Awesome. Any questions from the audience? Yeah. We can pass that microphone back, or if you just wanted to speak.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you all for being here. It's, I think of post-COVID, and it gives me a really a more of a refreshed perspective of where we are at right now. So with that being said, my question is, there was a mention by one of the presenters that we looked at a period of political rhetoric And we mentioned Donald Trump and a period from 2016 to 2020. That's never stopped, and he's never went away. And it's getting more dangerous. And I just want to take this opportunity to maybe you as students kind of express, as students on campus, what can we do about that?
Hello? Hello?
Thank you.
I think so. I don't really need it.
Okay.
All right. So, I'll say the things that are needed in order to really combat what happened during COVID, especially during, it was very, what was it, a scary time. It wasn't a really unrecognizable time. It was something really different that was really going on to everybody. And it really touched everybody as a whole, from the rich all the way to the poor and stuff like that. But it really showed that us as a people, we need to start being more focused on the community and not really just individual actions and stuff like that. We need to take charge. We need to start doing things that will support the community more, and not really just how it will just support just one or two individuals as a whole. We need to start implementing more policies and more jobs and a lot of things that really will support a diverse amount of people as a whole. And I feel like us just fighting for more policies that will help the different people, regardless of religious, colors, anything and stuff like that, it will really help the community as a together instead of just doing everything just by ourselves. We need to think of us as a team and Earth as our home and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay. Something that I noticed, I don't know if it's working, but something that I noticed while being a Black student at a PWI is like not feeling like you belong, not feeling like you're worthy, and it's mainly because we don't have spaces for us. Like we have to share everything, and it's like it's okay for us to just have a safe space for people of color. Like everything just seems like it seems like everybody cares about the problems, but when it's really time to do something about it, it's not really unity or a community. So I would just say, if you feel like a problem isn't your problem, try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and see what they go through, and hopefully that could build compassion that'll lead to change. So.
In terms, is this on? I can't tell. Okay. In terms of Donald Trump and his continuing impact, I think you make an excellent point. Donald Trump did not magically go away in 2020. I think the biggest thing to remember is that none of us can become complacent, and he has perpetuated this rhetoric since his campaign, whatever you want to say that started, officially or unofficially, through his presidency, and then continuing after he was no longer president. And I think the danger in that is that when he first entered the scene as a political figure, it was, the things he was saying were completely earth-shattering, and I hesitate to say bombastic because he's still very bombastic, but it was very, very jarring. And I think the danger in the longevity of his political career is, I think it would be very easy for everyone to become kind of numb or desensitized to what he's saying, because it's been all these years now and he just keeps saying these things, but that doesn't take away from the harm he's actively doing every time he reiterates this incredibly horrible and divisive and racist rhetoric. And so I think one answer to that question would be to remain vigilant, and like Sonny indicated in his interview with me, to take care of other people in the community and ourselves, and to not roll over or get used to the situation, and to remain fighting every day and proving to the community and, you know, locally or on a larger scale that this is not acceptable and nobody's is going to treat it as acceptable by getting used to it.
All right, we'll take one more question.
Hi, my name is Crystal Abel. I'm actually a member of the McLean County Board, so I was very excited to see that a couple of you focused on immigrant rhetoric in our local communities. So I'm just wondering, you know, with all of the talk around the national news and Donald Trump, if the two of you or anyone else on the panel had anything that really surprised you or stuck out to you when examining how these issues and rhetoric and our politicians in general here in McLean County, how they're affecting the sense of community and belonging right here in Bloomington-Normal.
As I said in my PowerPoint, I think the most surprising thing for me was to see how Chuck Erickson's proposal was so similar to the speaker, Kim Miller. And I think that that just shows how immigration policy can really reflect and be echo chambers to anti-immigrant supporters, and how easily it constructs how we talk, how easy it is to connect crime and victimization to immigration without like mindlessly just following rhetoric without following where it comes from and stuff like that. So I think the surprising thing for me was how, I don't know if strategic is the right thing to say, but like how strategic Chuck Erickson's language in the proposal was reflected on like decades of anti-immigrant sentiment, and how it could be picked up on locals and anti-immigrant supporters.
And like also from looking at the community video as well, I would say Chuck Erickson's resolution really didn't represent the whole of McLean County at all, and I definitely see that it didn't like represent the whole as the board members as well too, because a lot of people were saying that it really lacked information. It was really just going off of just fear, thought, and really just no real type of substance in a way. So I just feel as if our community I don't think that our community is really in a bad state, but it's really a lot of confusion and definitely a lot of division going on. And I don't really think there's a lot of hate. Some people definitely have hate in their heart a lot, but I feel like it's more focused on we don't know what's the change going on, because we're going through I feel like we're going through a real evolution to something bigger going on, and COVID really pushed us to that change, and we have to really look at ourselves and really look at our communities and see who we are and what we can do for us as a team.
Thank you all for your questions and for your beautiful answers. We'll go ahead and take you have,
I think that the questions actually resonate with me in very powerful ways. I love the conversation that was happening in the panel, right? Because I think it's very easy for these rhetorics, for us to think of community as being sort of persuaded by these rhetorics. Certainly some people that were at the board meeting were persuaded by the rhetoric. But what I see emerging from the panel and emerging from the research that came out of this panel is the work that it takes to build community. Right? It is work that is done El Día de los Muertos. It is work that is done in the school. It is work that is done by community organizations. So I think that we are really at the crossroads of some very important moments in the history of the community. All of these issues are happening nationally, but we're living them here in the community. And what I see is a community that is trying to understand how is it that we build community and that we fold immigrants into our community. I think immigrants are doing a lot of the work, evidence of Maria's, Taniyah's, and Miriam's work, as well as students and as well as some of the locals that are community leaders. And so congratulations, this is fantastic.
Okay, we'll go ahead and take a brief 5-minute intermission, and then we'll go ahead and get started with that second panel.
got this, guys. You guys got this.
Te digo, mamita, que me voy a desmayar.
You're making me more nervous.
Welcome back to the second half of the presentation for this morning. The second panel, in contrast to the first panel, which tended to have a more community focus and a more political focus, the second panel focuses more on family, on gender, and still threading through the issue of community and threading through the issue of belonging. And so I will let everyone introduce themselves as we go through, and we'll follow the same format. Everyone will present their papers, and then we will open up the floor for Q&A.
Good morning. My name is Krista Lemaire, and I am thrilled to kick off the second panel of presentations today. My presentation is titled Leading with Kindness, Navigating Identity and Belonging in the Latinx and LGBTQ+ communities of Bloomington-Normal, Illinois. It is now. I hope everybody heard that. Sorry if you didn't hear me. My name is Krista Lemaire, and I'm so honored to start off the second panel of presentations. So entering the senior capstone course with Professor Toro-Morn, I couldn't have imagined how transformative it would be. I initially planned to explore an LGBTQ+ related oral history, but the journey and the profound insights I gained far exceeded my expectations. Moving forward, I conducted an in-depth 45-minute interview with Raylene Gomez Hernandez, a trans woman of Mexican descent who has been deeply involved in efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. The focus of our conversation was to explore how LGBTQ+ Latin individuals in Bloomington-Normal, Illinois, establish or discover their community. This interview shed light on both the obstacles and victories experienced by those who embody dual identities of LGBTQ+ and Latin. While I can only offer a brief overview of my findings here, the research enhances the ongoing discussions about intersectionality, identity, and community building, highlighting how personal stories are vital for comprehending the complex experiences of marginalized communities. The importance of my research question cannot be overstated. In asking how LGBTQ+ Latin individuals in Bloomington-Normal, Illinois build or find their community, we tap into broader themes of belonging and identity that resonate universally, yet are uniquely experienced by marginalized groups. This inquiry not only bridges gaps in our academic understanding of intersectionality, but also serves practical purposes. It highlights the specific needs and mechanisms through which these communities foster resilience and solidarity in the face of societal challenges. So, understanding these dynamics equips policymakers, educators, and community leaders with the knowledge to better support the inclusion and well-being of LGBTQ+ Latin individuals. By documenting and analyzing the lived experiences of these individuals, this research contributes to a more inclusive narrative that acknowledges and celebrates diversity within our society, encouraging a more empathetic and informed approach to community engagement and development. So my study draws on diverse scholarly works that frame my analysis. I specifically reference Vega's insightful Latino Heartland, which provides a backdrop of Latin experiences in the Midwest, enhancing our comprehension of identity and belonging, along with setting an example of how to actively listen and engage with your interviewees. Central to my study is Raylene's personal narrative. Again, Raylene, a trans Latina from Mexico City, who now resides in Bloomington-Normal, offers a vivid illustration of how sexual, gender, and cultural identities intersect. Her journey from navigating her identity within a traditional Mexican family to finding acceptance in a homoparental American home underscores the crucial role of inclusive spaces and supportive communities. Raylene's involvement in local activities like musical theater and organizations like the Prairie Pride Coalition exemplify the active search for and creation of spaces that celebrate her identity. This echoes the findings from authors who wrote about the importance of authenticity in fostering community connection for urban Latinx LGBTQ+ youth. Furthermore, Raylene's engagement with educational institutions like Wesleyan and ISU illustrates the significant impact of educational settings in fostering community support. Her story brings to life the specific findings of authors who highlighted how community involvement and faith service attendance are pivotal in the psychological health outcomes of Black and Latinx LGBTQ+ youth. My discussion also navigates the coping strategies, which include strategic identity management and developing a critical consciousness about systems of oppression. These strategies are crucial for understanding how our community members navigate their social worlds, seeking to create environments that respect and value their complex identities. In all, my research not only sheds light on the resilience and strategies employed by LGBTQ+ Latina individuals, but also highlights the transformative power of acceptance, understanding, and solidarity. By integrating these personal experiences with broader academic discussions, we can foster a more inclusive and supportive environment for all community members. So Raylene's journey, while marked by moments of acceptance and community engagement, also reveals the profound challenges faced by those at the intersection of LGBTQ+ and Latina identities. These challenges are not just personal, but are deeply embedded in broader social and systemic issues. As shown on my slides, I have shown the challenges presented in my research. However, I wanted to specifically focus on navigating dual minority status and cultural and familial acceptance. Raylene, again as a trans Latina, had to navigate the complexities of being part of two marginalized groups. The dual minority status often brings a unique set of challenges, including heightened discrimination and the need to constantly negotiate her identity in spaces that may not fully understand or accept either aspects of her identity. And then coming from a traditional Mexican family, Raylene faced the challenge of gaining acceptance of her trans identity within her own cultural community. This is a common barrier for many LGBTQ+ Latina individuals who may face rejection or misunderstanding from family members who hold traditional views about gender and sexuality. And so now Raylene's actively engaged in spaces that not only acknowledged but celebrated her identity. Her involvement in local LGBTQ+ organizations like the Prairie Pride Coalition and participation in activities such as musical theater were not just hobbies, but strategic moves to foster environments where she and others could truly belong. In her roles at educational institutions, Raylene worked to implement diversity and inclusion initiatives. These efforts were crucial in shaping more accepting and educational environments that recognize and celebrate diversity, thus supporting not just her growth, but that of the entire community. Despite the challenges, Raylene remained committed to her cultural roots and her LGBTQ+ identity, skillfully managing both aspects to navigate her intersectional identity. Her dedication not only showcased the power of embracing one's full self in community building, but also highlights her deep understanding of systemic barriers. By educating others and advocating for systemic change, Raylene fostered a critical consciousness essential for the resilience of her community. Now let's explore how we can build on Raylene's inspiring example to strengthen our own communities through advocacy, participation, and the celebration of our diverse identities. Others can engage in similar strategies to strengthen their communities, whether it's through active participation in local organizations, leveraging professional roles to advocate for inclusive policies, or maintaining and celebrating one's cultural and personal identities. These actions create a stronger and more connected communities. So today I really wanted to highlight the transformative power of personal narratives and community support in understanding and assisting the LGBTQ+ Latina communities. My research, centered on individuals like Raylene, demonstrates how embracing one's identity and engaging with local support networks can significantly impact personal well-being and collective empowerment. I encourage each of you to actively engage with and support marginalized communities through advocacy, research, and direct action. Let's use the insights gained from diverse personal narratives to inform better practices and policies that foster inclusivity and respect for all identities. Together, we can make a meaningful difference by listening to, amplifying, and acting upon the voices of those left, or often left in the shadows. And as stated by Raylene herself, as long as you lead with kindness, usually the path opens for yourself. So, thank you.
Awesome. Hello, my name is Austin Wilson. The title of my project is The Ambiguities of Language and Latinx Identity, an Oral History of Michaela Harris. So to begin with, I would like to provide an overview of the research objectives for this project. Given the cultural and historical backdrop of the Midwest, the integration of Latinx persons is often a difficult process marked by many barriers. These include anti-immigration policies, ethnic and racial discrimination, and contribution citizenship, which is recognized in Suje Vega's book, The Latino Heartland, as parameters of acceptance based on the judgment and contribution of Latinx members in a community. As a collective, the purpose of our research is to analyze and share the different sociological forces impacting the process of belonging for Latinx individuals in the Heartland. My project explores the relationship between language and cultural identity, focusing particularly on the perspective of a monolingual English-speaking Latinx member. I will be using MES as a convenient acronym throughout the presentation, and how language affects both cultural identity and the process of belonging. The following are the research questions that guided my project, specifically addressing the experiences of monolingual English-speaking Latinx persons. So firstly, how is language connected to cultural and racial identity? How does the absence of language, particularly Spanish, affect the cultural identity of MES Latinx people? How significant is cultural identity for MES Latinx people as well? And then how is language manifested throughout the process of belonging? And then finally, what strategies and practices are used by MES Latinos to deploy their cultural identity outside of language? For the literature review, I have emphasized 3 significant quotes from different scholarly pieces that connect to the experience of MES Latinx persons and contribute to the major themes of this project. Firstly, language becomes an emblem of group identity. This summarizes the association of particular language to a collective identity, racializing people under linguistic context and blurring the diversity of identities and experiences within the group. Next, ethnic identity is twin-skin to linguistic identity. This highlights the diversity of ethnic identities, which connects to a broad range of spoken languages, even including how differences in fluency of Spanish can impact identity. Finally, the enregistrement is a theoretical process through which forms of language become endowed with cultural values. This explains how language is often linked to social identities and roles, rendering socially constructed expectations of ethno-racial identities under linguistic expectations. Alrighty. And then on to the development of this research project. This project utilizes a qualitative research design, specifically the conducting of an oral history with a local Latinx member of the community. An oral history is a qualitative method of data collection that involves gathering and preserving firsthand accounts and life experiences. These are often documented through a recorded session of open-ended questions. The recruiting process for this project was facilitated by Dr. Toro-Morn, whose involvement ensured the careful selection of a suitable participant aligning with my research objectives. After completing the oral history, I transcribed the interview and coded key statements and themes that address my research questions. Furthermore, the foundation of this research project incorporates a variety of relevant coursework completed in our senior experience course, including the studying and reviewing of oral histories, performing document and content analysis, and delving into Latinx studies and literature. Next, I would like to share a brief overview and some biographical details of my informant, Michaela Harris, whose collaboration is immensely appreciated. Michaela is a third-generation Mexican-American born and raised in Central Illinois. Her great-grandparents immigrated from Mexico to the United States, traveling throughout the Midwest region under migrant field work, specifically her great-grandmother, and then railroad work, her great-grandfather, before meeting each other and settling in the Chicagoland area in the late 1920s. Describing herself as half Mexican and half white conglomerate, Michaela comes from an Americanized household that transformed traditional Mexican practices. Her family's early assimilation into rural, white-dominant Midwestern communities impacted their cultural expression, including the diminishing of spoken Spanish. Currently serving as the Director of Communications at McLean County Museum of History, Michaela is actively engaged in community-based work and appreciates any opportunity to be a storyteller. This involves sharing her family and cultural heritage and unique perspective on burning social topics. The following slides will outline my data analysis, using quotes and ideas from the oral history with Michaela to address the overarching themes and questions presented earlier. In discussing the relationship between language and cultural and racial identity, Michaela recognizes language as an important element of culture and describes a certain sense of cultural disconnect in losing that language. Additionally, despite facing assumptions about her Spanish abilities, which speaks to the racialization of bodies under linguistic expectations, Michaela actually finds solace at the intersection of her identity, even without Spanish, because society is a multicultural unit of varying identities and language acquisition. Finally, Michaela's disliking of labels for racial identity may be explained by the crossover of her cultural identity, not identifying purely as Mexican or American, and how language contributes to the ambiguity of ethnic and racial identity. To share how the connection between language and cultural racial identity impacts the process of belonging, I want to echo some statements from Michaela that capture issues related to dual identity, white passing, and not representing the Latinx community. She says, as a kid, it was interesting trying to figure out your place in the world. I have never felt fully Mexican, never felt fully white. It is always in a middle ground, and I'm happy to live in that middle ground now. She also says, I don't feel that I fully have a place in certain pockets of the Latino community. I can speak to a third-generation perspective, yet that perspective is very different than those who have fully actively lived being Latino. I don't really fit fully into one or the other. I am predominantly white. I have grown up in a white society, anchored in my whiteness. I have never been a target of any slurs or any type of othering. And finally, when you are pushed or relegated to the margins, there is almost a stronger sense of community built. I have not felt the full weight of that. I think it's interesting to see how all these different statements will play to the development of her cultural and racial identity and the impact that language acquisition can have on that. And then finally, this slide outlines the various strategies detailed by Michaela to anchor her Latinidad identity in the absence of language. Firstly, Michaela's name, including the cultural pronunciation, holds significant meaning as a tangible piece of cultural and family history. Michaela has connected to her Mexican culture through her mother and grandmother, particularly in the realm of food, sharing recipes for Americanized versions of traditional Mexican dishes, and also listening to generational stories and memories from both her mother and grandmother. Michaela continues to engage and learn about Mexican history and art, both personally and in the community, yet also connects in her efforts to travel to Mexico and the National Mexican American Museum, which were both transformative experiences for Michaela. Finally, Michaela considers herself a spiritual individual and often prays to her ancestors, and also celebrates Mexican traditions like Dia de los Muertos, which contributes to the nurturing of her Mexican identity. To conclude, I want to recognize the limitations of interviewing only one community member and acknowledge that this single interview does not fully represent the diverse perspectives and experiences within the Latinx community regarding language and cultural identity and the entirety of belonging in the Midwestern society. However, it is evident that language plays a significant role in shaping cultural and racial identity in society, serving as both a symbol to racialize and homogenize marginalized groups, while also creating varying degrees of values and attachments to culture and racial identity within those groups. Finally, I just want to emphasize how oral history research is both important and invaluable for sharing the life experiences and voices of marginalized groups and individuals that are often masked by the prevailing white narratives and overbearing racism in society. That is all. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Daniela Bernal, and this is my SOCH 300 project. I went ahead and titled it Triunfadora, Navigating New Horizons, a Latina Mother's Journey. So as an individual who grew up with immigrant parents, this was a topic that interests me because I wanted to delve into the complex intersectionality of tensions between work and family, navigating a dual identity, and social dynamics and cultural values regarding Latina immigrant mothers. This is an area that I wanted to explore to unmask some of the challenges that Latina immigrant mothers face when wanting to preserve those ties. The area I will be focusing on primarily in this class is, is Latina immigrant mothers who migrated to the United States and their experiences regarding work, education, family, and their dual identity. I'm going to be specifically focusing on these three research questions. How do Latina immigrant mothers in the U.S. navigate the balance between work, education, family responsibilities, and community involvement? What are the primary tensions experienced by Latina immigrant mothers when trying to prioritize work, education, and family obligations? And lastly, how do Latina immigrant mothers navigate and influence gender socialization within their families? And then moving on to the methods portion of my project, the participant in my study was a Latina immigrant mother who's residing in Bloomington-Normal. I utilized the combination of a symbolic interactionist approach and an in-depth interview to explore the meanings behind concepts like work, education, family, and cultural identity among a Latina immigrant mother. This allowed for me to get a deeper perspective on the participant themselves, where they can also express their thoughts, feelings, and experiences in their own words. The informant had the opportunity to recount on their migration journey and reflect on its impact on their dual identity. So then, moving on to the data findings of my project, my informant was Beatriz Garcia. She's currently 48 years old, race ethnicity Latina Mexican, gender identity woman. She became a mother at 25 years old and currently has 3 children. Through my findings, I categorized them into 4 major themes. The first one, immigration and adaptation, cultural identity and belonging, educational pursuits versus challenges, and lastly, family dynamics and gender roles. So through my in-depth interview with Beatriz, I was able to answer the following research questions. How do Latina immigrant mothers in the U.S. navigate the balance between work, education, family responsibilities, and community involvement? How do Latina immigrant mothers navigate and influence gender socialization within their families? So, touching on immigration and adaptation theme, Beatriz had moved to Bloomington-Normal from Mexico 5 years ago because of a job opportunity. This shows the role that employment opportunities have on driving immigration. Beatriz also shared with me that although she had support networks from her employers, she did face challenges like language barriers and obtaining a driver's license and social security number, which highlights just a few of the challenges that immigrants will often face when adjusting to a new country. Moving on to the cultural identity and belonging theme, Beatriz reflects with me on her connection to Mexico, stating that when she thinks of her hometown, she primarily thinks of Mexico because she spent most of her life there. She also shared with me some family traditions that she shares with her family, like visiting the beach annually, which tie to her cultural identity, and she also continues to practice this today. She touched on her efforts to improve on her English language through organizations like Start Leader, emphasizing the importance on language while integrating into a new community. She also showed a desire to maintain and preserve cultural identity within her family, despite living in a different cultural context, when she expressed concern of her children's disconnection from Mexico traditions and preference for American culture. And then moving on to educational pursuits versus challenges, I went ahead and added 2 quotes from Beatriz that really stood out to me. So Beatriz had mentioned some challenges she faced while balancing education, because while in the university she became pregnant. This affected her abilities to continue studying, particularly during the morning due to health reasons. She also touched on financial struggles she encountered, needing to work to support her family, often selling candy. Although she encountered many challenges, Beatriz was determined to continue her education and completed her studies. And then moving on to the family dynamics and gender roles theme, I also added 2 quotes that stood out to me from Beatriz. Within her household, she shares household roles with her husband. He takes on tasks like cleaning and cooking, and together they discipline their children, but Beatriz will often face or take on the more disciplinary role. Beatriz works from home, so this allows for her to manage her job responsibilities along with family responsibilities. She also expressed her desire for her children to continue to educate themselves and pursue successful careers. And then she expressed to me that she does not expect her daughters to fulfill the same roles that she has in her household, and the same goes for her husband, or for her son. And then to conclude, circling back to my title, I had the word triunfadora on there, and if you don't know what that means, that translates to triumph or successful. When I had asked Beatriz what she would title her life story, she wasn't sure, so she asked for my suggestion, and this is something that my mom always tells me and my brother, so I thought this applied to Beatriz because she's, her journey is one of perseverance, achievement, and resilience. She triumphed over challenges to achieve success in various aspects of her life through educational achievement, career success, adaptability, and cultural preservation. And I just wanted to add one note that I'm very thankful that I got to interview her, but just wanted to say that this is not every Latina immigrant mother's experience. And yeah, thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Olivia Brucato and I'm a senior this year at Illinois State and I'm going to be graduating in May. I'm very excited. Last semester, Dr. Maura Toro-Morn came into one of my classes and presented this 300 capstone to take in the spring. And after she spoke about topics on Latino experiences and belonging, I was immediately interested in taking the class and knew I wanted to take this opportunity to do meaningful work. The title of my research paper is Navigating Motherhood in the Heartland, the Oral History of a Latina Immigrant Mother in Bloomington-Normal, Illinois. So to provide some background information on demographics from BN Welcoming in McLean County, and Frank Beck, who spoke at the beginning, claimed that there are 11,874 immigrants that call McLean County home. Initially, from 60 counties, this population makes up 6.9% of our current population. The majority of these individuals come from Latin America, Asia, and Africa. So I did not complete this research project on my own. Two of my peers, Mariana and Daniela, who are on the panel right now, we created a mini research group. And our projects center around the oral histories of 4 immigrant Latina mothers, but mine focuses on one oral history that I completed specifically on mothering and reproductive work. During class, to tie in, we read Latino Heartland of Borders and Belonging in the Midwest by Suhey Vega, which encapsulates what a sense of belonging may look like, community, and experiences of Latinos in Lafayette, Indiana. A juicy quote that I think is worth reading is, "Recognizing that Latino residents do not live in a vacuum, this book approaches the complexity of multi-ethnic, multiracial, and multicultural communities through an examination of how these residents interact with or isolate themselves from one another in the same space." So I collected a biography on Miriam Padilla-Cruz. Hi. She's a 39-year-old woman born in Mexico City. She has a degree in marketing that she completed in Mexico. She has aided teams in sales and organizing company events and conferences in different departments. She has been in the United States for 6 years and lived in Michigan for 2 years prior to living in Illinois. She is a mother to her 2 daughters. Eliana is 12 years old and Sharon is 10 years old. Both girls attend Oakdale Elementary School. She also has 2 dogs. Miriam's husband is an engineer working for Rivian, and they have been married for 12 years. She has a passion for her traditions and culture and spends most of her time partaking in volunteer acts, specifically the Immigration Project, the Day of the Dead, and her daughter's school. Miriam has support from her sisters and still makes the effort to travel back to Mexico to see family once or twice a year. So I knew when I came into this class I wanted to research topics that included mothering, family, and reproductive work. So I came up with themes that were the basis for my questions. First was community. So I asked, in what ways do Latina immigrant mothers find community in Bloomington-Normal? The second theme is adjustment. And I asked, do Latina immigrant mothers feel as though they must conform to a new way of living in the United States? Finally was struggles, and I asked, what are the struggles that immigrant Latina mothers face in raising their children and still wanting to implement their culture? For methods, this paper draws on the one oral history that I conducted with Miriam at the Bloomington Public Library on March 21st. The interview I conducted was 1 hour and 3 minutes long. A consent form was requested at the beginning of our interview. The process was completed by recording our interview on my phone in the conference room. After our interview was concluded, I airdropped my recorded audio to my laptop. I then used Microsoft Word Online to transcribe our conversation in code for bigger themes. I went back and listened through the interview to clean it up and review for any repetition and conciseness. Some of Miriam's responses were in Spanish and then translated to me in English by her sister that also attended the interview. It is very important to me that her story was kept the same, so I decided to keep her words in my transcription for authenticity, but when I captured different quotes in my paper, I cleaned the wording to ensure directness. I had also electronically contacted Miriam for clarification on certain topics or words that we had discussed. I had 3 themes that emerged from my work: pride in family, engagement, and identity. Pride in family discusses the ways in which Miriam connects with her family and cultural life. For example, Miriam ensures her family's relations stay intact by visiting Mexico once a year, and her daughters still electronically communicate with other family members. Miriam instills her cultures and traditions into her daughters' lives. A specific quote from her sister was, "Their daughters always try to have both cultures, the American culture, but always try to have the roots of Mexican culture and all the traditions." Engagement speaks on Miriam's contributions to her community. Miriam's direct quote states, "When I arrived here in Bloomington, I discovered more and more things to help integrate the community, and the reason is because it is important to support other people." She is also a volunteer at her daughter's school and has taken on other volunteering roles. She has contributions to things like the Immigration Project, where she receives papers and helps to translate to prepare documents for a case. And for the Day of the Dead, as Taniyah did her presentation, she created an ofrenda, which is an offering that is placed in the museum that we're in here today. The work she does for her community and daughters is truly admirable. Lastly is identity. Miriam is a commendable mother who loves nothing more than her family. Miriam and her husband instill cultural traditions and important values into their girls. Miriam's direct quote about her girls' future was that she wants them to explore, that they be happy, free, flexible, and discover their own paths in life. To conclude, I went into this process thinking that it would be easy, but as I've gone through it, I realized that this isn't just the walk in the park, and there's so many layers to the project that we've done, and we've all put a lot of work in. My research project allowed me to shed light on the complexities of immigrant Latina mothers' experiences and answer my research questions. But future researchers may want to explore more generational aspects of this topic. I think an interview with a daughter, mother, or even grandmother would encapsulate so much rich data that could be interviewed. And I was also always interested in the idea of researching mothering, and because my mom and I have a really close relationship, she's here. And but once I completed this, I was even more absorbed by the generational aspect. For sociology as a whole in my major, sociology is all around us, and being in this major has changed the way I look at the world and influenced my intellectual development. This project has allowed me to look at situations from different point of views and ask the bigger questions. Overall, this experience has taught me a lot about myself, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have taken this course. Thank you.
I'm not terrified, you are. Okay. Fluency is open-ended, a case study on a Latina in the Midwest. How do you work this? Is it? Oh, perfect, okay. The focus of this study was to examine how language is connected to race and identity within the Latinx community. I wanted to hear a student's perspective because I knew they could offer a valid insight on how language was used in their home life and schooling. They could give firsthand accounts to the efficiency of the bilingual learning programs in elementary school and middle school. And they could highlight on their journey of finding community in institutions like Illinois State University. Overall, they could shed a light on the Latinx experience in Bloomington. And I'm happy that I got to interview a Latina who not only touched on these topics I just mentioned, but also allowed herself to be vulnerable with every response that she gave. This is Lila, isn't she cute? Lila's a 21-year-old Latina currently attending Illinois State University. She's also in the audience, so. Her major is social work, and when she isn't translating for her mother's friends' appointments, she's practicing her color guard routines, watching K-dramas, or working on her studies with me and our friend Mariana. I met through a Chicana feminisms class, and as her TA, I got to experience firsthand what a wonderful writer and student she was. She articulated herself well and was very honest, so I thought to myself, there could be no better candidate than her. So as I move forward, I wanted to incorporate literature that touched on the challenges that she mentioned in our interview. So the first book that I wanted to talk about was Borderlands La Frontera de Nu Mestiza. Literally, I think in our class, like, we all love this book. We read it so many times. But the chapter I wanted to focus on was How to Tame a Wild Tongue. And I took these two quotes because I felt like they encapsulated some of the issues that Laila and I touched on. So first one being, Chicanas feel uncomfortable talking in Spanish to Latinas, afraid of their censure. If a person, Chicana or Latina, has a low estimation of my native tongue, she also has a low estimation of me. I'm so sorry, I'm like getting over a cold right now. Something that Laila touched on a lot during our interview was the big role that language plays in her identity. She kept emphasizing that she tries to practice it as much as she can with her family and with her friends because she doesn't want to lose it. She said so herself that she's seen quite a few of her friends lose the language, and she feels that it's a very central aspect of her identity. And then the next book I want to talk about is Looking Like a Language, Sounding Like a Race, Racial Linguistic Ideologies and Learning of Latinidad. The notion of U.S. Latinx produce neither correct English nor Spanish invokes the idea that they utilize no language properly, which simultaneously constructs them as racial linguistic. Besides Laila talking about her own experience of being a Nosabu kid, I myself can relate to it as well, and I love doing my project and my interview with her because it was so refreshing to hear another Latino or Latina student talk about this very issue where there's this border between both languages. You never really know how to speak properly either English nor Spanish, but you feel very much it's, I'm so sorry. You feel like you're being watched for everything you say, if you don't say something right one way or the other, you're constantly being scrutinized for it. I think that's a word that we also use to describe it, it's very scrutinized, especially amongst the Latino community. And it's not even just outside, your teachers, even amongst your own peers or your parents. I can't tell you how many times my mom has corrected my grammar in Spanish. But anyway, I chose these two books because I felt like they encapsulated a lot of the issues that Laila and I touched on. And overall, doing an oral history, I've never done this before. This was very new for me. So but I enjoyed every step of it. And I remember in preparation for our interviews, we were asked to read 3 articles entailing the proper methods necessary to conduct an oral history. Out of these 3 articles, one stood out to me, and that article was Learning to Listen. One of my biggest fears when conducting this interview is overstepping or trying to pursue my own agenda while Layla was, telling me about her experience with language and her education and her home life. So one thing that I really wanted to make sure that I didn't do was try to put words in her mouth or try to put a label on her as to as she was describing what she stood for and what were her values. I wanted her to come to terms with that on her own. So I wanted to highlight 2 quotes from the article that really resonated with me as I was conducting my interview with Layla. So the first one being, what I learned by listening carefully to my interviews is that women's oral history requires much more than a new set of questions to explore women's unique experiences and unique perspectives. We need to consider carefully whether our interviews create a context in which women feel comfortable exploring the subjective feelings that give meaning to actions, things, and events, whether they allow women to explore unwomanly feelings and behaviors, and whether they encourage women to explain what they mean in their own terms. And again, while I was conducting my own interview, I wanted to make sure I honored her experiences and highlighted her humanity. I wanted to make sure I broke that power dynamic that one would normally have between researcher and interviewee. Honestly, I wish you could listen to our audio. I can't put it in the transcript, but we'll be laughing, we'll be reminiscing, and it just feels very natural and casual, which is what I wanted. Anyway, as my last slide, my free research questions were, what are the tensions between education attainment and language? How do bilingual students maneuver language in their lives? And what criteria do Latinx individuals base language fluency on? And I think out of all 3 of these, I wanted to touch on the last one, and I wanted to quote Layla herself. And she said, "I'd say I'm fluent right now. I'd say I've been fluent for most of my life in terms of just being able to communicate myself beyond just basic vocabulary, like being able to form sentences and being able to have a back and forth conversation with somebody." I think that's really valid, and I think it's very important that in learning new languages and communicating with each other, that we remember that there's no one way to do it. And fluency is very much open-ended. And I think it's really important that, even though I know this one interview isn't representative of all the Latino students in ISU or in Bloomington, but I think it's a start tapping into this topic, because I think it's very important. And I've seen myself that a lot of students, especially Latino students, feel this pressure to speak perfect Spanish and English and get scrutinized a lot for it. So I think it's very important that we touch on the underlying tensions with this problem, underlying tensions with this topic, and that we look more into it and we conduct more oral histories of more students and people in the community who also struggle and who also form their identity with language. Thank you.
All right, hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Mariana Munoz, and today I'll be presenting my oral history for my sociology capstone titled Esta es buena tierra para sembrar, This is good land to sow, and it is an exploration of the cultural tensions cultivating empowerment in a Latina in the heartland. So the original inspiration comes from the 2002 film Real Women Have Curves, which explores the complexities of being a first-generation Mexican girl with dreams of attending university but facing opposition from her mother, who expects her daughter to follow and uphold traditional values and cultural notions of womanhood. After watching the film, I felt that my narrative, along with many other first-generation Latinas, felt that our life story was accurately explored. But then I asked myself whether the mother's narrative received the same level of respect as they're also molding their identities in conjunction with the dominant culture. And I know we've mentioned Sujay Vega several times throughout this panel, but her contribution to Latinos in academia is a worthy framework in exploring the strides that Latinos make in finding home while facing political and cultural opposition. And more specifically, in the chapter Needing Home, a group of Latina women actively pursue and assert their right to practice their faith in admiration for La Virgen de Guadalupe in a predominantly white space. So I took these mediums as inspiration to continue a never-ending exploration of gender and motherhood on immigrant Latinas across the United States. I felt inclined to explore their life story as our mothers are positioned as the central piece in building homes, cultivating identity among their children, and dismantling oppressive systems through the lessons and morals gained through their experiences. For my study, I focus on addressing 4 central research questions. 1, how are Latinas constructing a sense of belonging in the heartland? 2, what are the tensions that mothers face in finding space while raising their children? 3, what are the aspects of their identity that were erased or trade-offs in terms of their language, their culture, or their gender expectations? And finally, 4, where are Latina mothers finding community and exploring these experiences? So aside from Sujay Vega and Real Women Have Curves, I was pleased to find that my literature review process incorporated a number of qualitative studies done on Latinas living in small rural towns across America. And here's what I found. First, social capital was positively associated with life satisfaction and economic capital. In Rafaeli's 2012 study, it explores the health outcomes of Latina mothers and found that community building and networking is crucial in fostering strength as they navigate financial uncertainties and feelings of isolation. And 2, we must challenge the misconception that immigrant Latina mothers are victims to their circumstances. Vienna's 2001 study found that our institution and our social workers have an unconscious prejudice that positions Latinas as being incompetent and inadequate of improving their life circumstances. And this oral history alone doesn't fully represent the number of Latina mothers making strides to survive, but I'm pleased to capture the richness of one woman here in Bloomington-Normal who discloses her life trajectory with so much wisdom. With the help of Maura Toro-Morn, we found a vibrant group of mothers who regularly meet for their club de lectura. I prepared for this interview by creating a questionnaire with Daniela and Olivia, who were also interested in documenting the experience of motherhood for Latina mothers. And our questionnaire followed with questions regarding their migration, their gender socialization, community building, the tensions they face in their careers, and reproductive work. I met with my informant on 2 different occasions to fully capture the details of her life story. On March 21st, we had our first introduction at the Bloomington Public Library, followed by our second interview on April 4th at the ISU Student Service Building. So I want to introduce you to Gabriela Sanchez. She immigrated from Venezuela after witnessing the political and economic distress her country underwent through at the hands of President Hugo Chavez and Nicolás Maduro. Before this political trajectory, Gabriela and her husband were in a privileged socioeconomic bubble where she was a business owner with a master's degree and her husband held a prestigious position as an engineer. Once she witnessed the microeconomics of the nation start to impact her family, as well as other Venezuelan families, it was clear that raising her family and prospering financially was a slim possibility for them. 6 months after arriving to the United States, Gabriela became pregnant with her 3rd child, and she didn't have a work visa, so was dealing with the emotional transition of being a stay-at-home mom. But one thing was clear to her. Venezuela, the nation that she still adores to this day, cannot provide her the same adequate maternal care or financial prospects to prosper. And so through my data analysis, I found 2 themes that address my 4 research questions. 1, rebuilding as a negotiation process identifies the borderlands in which Gabriela was challenged to either erase or affirm her cultural and gender identity. Gabriela came across several institutions that questioned her customs and consequently led her to led them to pressure her to either passively or assertively justify her positioning. One example was when her son's school administration invited him to participate in a summer program where students were invited to overstay a couple nights at the university. Gabriela outspokenly resisted her son from staying the night, which is a custom that many Latinas mothers hold on to as they're concerned about their child's safety. The program coordinators passively objected to making any accommodations for her son and proposed that Gabriela coordinate and communicate with her son regarding scheduled pickups. Her son ultimately decided that it was in his best interest to continue with softball practices rather than attending the summer program, but Gabriela recalls this event with frustration, as noted in that quotation here, under rebuilding as a negotiation process. Secondly, in cultivating third spaces, Gabriela felt alienated and alone navigating an unfamiliar town. She eventually found a group of women and partners whose husbands worked for Rivian. And these women found solidarity and communion with each other by regularly meeting to discuss their life, their transitions, their struggles, and their joys. Miriam, who has been mentioned before in this panel, started the Club de Lectura, where she and a group of women sought a space to continue their intellectual curiosity through discussions at the Bloomington Public Library. I would say that they're pioneers in constructing an extensive array of Spanish literature that didn't exist at the library beforehand. Finding a group of women with similar interests and drive empowered Gabriela to find other spaces to belong across her career and her personal life. So I wish I could go further into detail about Gabriela's effort to empower herself, but in short, I would say the past 4 years in Bloomington, she pushed herself on a journey of self-reflection and reconstruction. She shape-shifted her notions of empowerment as a mother and a Latina by attending English classes, seeking career advice, applying for positions at PWIs, and finding solace with a group of women with similar trajectories. I finished this presentation with a quote by Alice Walker, who believes that stories centered on the female perspective, their struggles, their triumphs, are in danger of being misrepresented, disoriented, or lost. And I felt like this was my responsibility to continue this project to bring light to many women here in town who are ordinary people but have such a rich life story. I hope I did her story justice, and I encourage all of us to listen to our mothers more. Next month is Mother's Day, so make sure you thank her for her efforts and her sacrifices. So yeah, thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. I want to thank everyone for coming out. My name is Sebastian Sancen. I'm a senior sociology student at Illinois State. My research project is titled Beyond the Labels, Exploring the Diversity of Latino Identities. When I first started this class, I had no expectations or no knowledge of what I thought this was going to be like. So I found this topic very interesting because it focused on an aspect of labels and identity that I was all too familiar with. So after my introduction to the topic and gathering more knowledge about certain labels used within the Latino community, I was very excited to go home and actually talk to my mother and get her on the phone and let her know about everything that I had learned. It was then when I asked her what labels that she preferred to use, and besides the label Mexicana, she normally steered towards the label Hispanic. And in that moment, I was a little bit surprised. I'd always referred to myself as Latino, so considering that my mother and I labeled ourselves differently, but are very similar in terms of our culture and our lifestyles, why wouldn't we label ourselves the same? And so for this reason, this is why I chose this topic for my research project. So I focused on two main research questions throughout my project. The first one being, how do individuals within the Latino community identify themselves? And what labels are important to the Latino community and why? So I began my research with an analysis of an online panel conducted by the McLean County Museum of History. This took place about a year ago, and it was called Conversando entre nosotros, What's in a Label? And after properly transcribing this panel, which lasted around an hour and a half, I closely analyzed and annotated the entire conversation and split up all the information based on specific themes. I carefully split all the information according to each panelist, and then from there, I was able to isolate and focus on everyone's individual story. So the panel consisted of multiple different people, but these three that I chose to show in my presentation were the ones that I felt shared the most information and life experience about what I was trying to research. So the first one is Rocio Rivadeneira. She currently works at Illinois State University, and she's the Associate Dean in the College of Arts and Sciences. Second, Raylene Gomez, who works at Illinois Wesleyan as the Assistant Director to Diversity and Inclusion. And Alejandro Enriquez, who is a professor at Illinois State University of Language, Literatures, and Cultures. So I felt like I chose the panelists because I found the information and their life experiences to pertain perfectly to my research. To add on to my research from the panel, I also reached out to a lot of outside sources that related very closely to my research as a whole. I was able to focus on three main themes within my research and all my findings. The first theme consisted about all the different Latino labels I was really focusing on, so that being Latino and Latina, Latinx, and Latine. The second theme that I focused on was the use focused on the use and significance of these ethnic labels. Here's where I researched the different labels and all the significance that it has to everybody and the significance that it carried. The last theme that I researched was on cultural identity and how basically identity is formed. I was able to find many different sources that focus on these similar topics and similar research questions as a whole as well. Okay, so some of my findings, what I was able to inquire about my findings were quite simple but complex at the same time. I learned that when it comes to labels like the ones we're looking at, everyone is going to have a different meaning for all of them. So when it came down to cultural identity, I found that it often was created based on many different aspects of one's life. Not only does it include said labels as we discussed earlier, but people also bring in their background, their race, and their life experiences when defining their cultural identity. So similar to identity, many people choose their ethnic label based on a variety of different factors, such as background, life experiences. One label may represent something completely different than another. So one quote by Raylene Gomez that she said in the panel that I think stuck with me during the whole project was, labels carry a big power, but they also evolve and they're also constantly changing. I think that kind of just brought the big picture. Kind of to conclude and wrap it up, I felt very fortunate to be able to conduct a research on a topic that I'm able to relate to. I felt going through this process really gave me the opportunity to evaluate my own identity and how I choose to represent it. One thing I will say about this research project is that I don't believe it to be complete. In fact, I don't think it can really ever be complete. As Raylene said, it's kind of always changing and evolving. And I think this is because the labels and identity depend on every specific individual. You can have two extremely similar individuals, as like I mentioned earlier with me and my mother, with similar backgrounds and similar lifestyles and basically growing up very similar, but the answer from each individual will be completely different. So I believe that as time goes on and our society continues to change, that so will ethnic labels and the ways in which people choose to identify. So to conclude, I want to say thank you to everyone on the panel because they shared real life experiences that not only I could relate to, but also many others as well. Thank you.
All righty. Let's give another big round of applause to everyone on panel 2 that presented today. You guys all did wonderful. So we'll open it up for another brief Q&A, and we'll go ahead and start off with that same first question as the last time. So if 2 or 3 of you would like to answer this one as well, what lasting impact do you see or do you hope to see your project having?
State the question one more time.
What lasting impact do you see or do you hope to see your project having?
I would say, since my project was based on trying to build or foster a sense of belonging, I would say to be, I don't know, I would hope that after I presented on mine, that people would take in the fact that you need to be more curious, you need to be more open to things that you're uncomfortable with, especially within marginalized communities. So I would just hope that it would bring a more open-mindedness, more curiosity, and just a more, I guess, open outlook on community building, and that you can really find it in more places than in just one. You know, so.
I guess I would say that it's easy for us to fall into sort of a trap or a mindset that these oral histories look like just individual stories, just one and done. It's not really that impactful, but I think that it's more important to look at these as like real life experiences. This is what is happening inside of our community, and instead valuing these stories and valuing why oral histories are important and the importance of sharing these stories. So I think the impact of my presentation is I would love for more people to conduct this sort of research. Again, it's easy to think that just stories that people have to share isn't very research or foundational and being real and influential, but I just think like, these people represent society and what's going on in society. Therefore, I think that this is a very valuable way of researching and spreading the message of very marginalized people.
Kind of what I hope to get out of my research is, as kind of Krista said, a little more curiosity, but also a lot of knowledge, especially about not only just the labels that I mentioned, but just how people kind of label themselves. I feel like with our world constantly changing and evolving, as Raylene said, that everyone's just got to be a little more open, and as time goes on, I think that there's going to be more labels and different terms created to help people identify themselves. Like I said, no two people are ever the same. So yeah.
Okay, any questions from audience members? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Luis. As a first-generation Mexican Chicano born in Illinois, I spoke Spanish first. That was my first language. I didn't learn English till I got to elementary school. I was the oldest, so I didn't have anybody to learn it from. Both my parents spoke Spanish, so that was my first language. Being always in densely populated cities, like, I would consider that this is a small town to me, like a really small town. So I don't have many opportunities to be around like Latino communities, you know? The only thing that I really have to practice my Spanish living in Bloomington-Normal for like the past 2 years is with my girlfriend, a couple of undocumented workers at my job, and my family when I speak to them on the phone. But other than that, like, I don't really have that many opportunities. So like, I guess my question would be, how can like the community, as in like the government, local businesses, education centers, community centers, how can they support like communities of Latinos to be able to go out to places to speak the language more? Because it was interesting to hear what Daniela had to say about like the language and how it is important to one's culture. Because you can tell when people come into work, they get excited that I'm there, because other than that, they don't have anybody else that they can speak to, have conversations with. When somebody comes in and asks for assistance, you can see like their face brighten up. When I can assist them, because nobody else can assist them, then they have that language barrier.
I love that you say that because I literally had that same experience when I worked at Walmart in the customer service desk. Because a lot of times you get people who wanted to send money to their families, but they didn't know how to speak English. So like sometimes my supervisors would pull me from like doing anything. They'd be like, hey, we need you at the customer service desk. And you'd literally see their face light up as soon as you switch to like Espanol. And I think one of the big things that Laila and I touched on as far as academics go, when you're learning Spanish in like in an elementary school setting, you're learning like every aspect of it. You're learning grammar, you're learning spelling, you're learning conversation. But once you get to like middle school and high school, those bilingual programs serve more as like a transition into English, and they kind of stopped adding to the Spanish language. So I think one thing that we could do is, as far as academics go, is focus on actually like adding more grammar, like maybe assigning book reports, maybe creating programs that practice the language in conversation and take into account that like different nationalities aren't going to speak Spanish the same way. There's no like one way to speak Spanish. So at least I feel like that's one step to it. That, and I think also as a community, and especially the Latino community here, from what I've seen, I've run into a